Knicks Timberwolves tomorrow night, first regular season game since the Karl-Anthony Towns trade. Should be a fun night for John in Minnesota. And Towns coming back home, a place where he spent 10 years, grew up in the league. I think he's looking forward to going back there and seeing friends. He said that. I don't know if he knows what to expect, but I think he's looking forward to seeing some old faces, probably John included. So I want to start with Karl. John, and I'm wondering I don't know how much you've seen of the Knicks, but you mentioned on Twitter a couple observations on Cat. What are your thoughts on what he's done so far in New York?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ian. I mean, I think, watching him, and I have paid close attention to the Knicks since this trade, trying to, kind of keep a track of everything that Cat has been doing and how he's been reacclimating and to a new place. And I think that I've found it interesting that you get people talking about, wow, he does this and he does that, and this is crazy. Look at how great his offensive skills are and how varied his talents are. And I just want to scream from the mountaintop. He's been doing this for 9 years in Minnesota. Like, this is the player that he has always been in terms of efficiency, in terms of when he plays center, really taking advantage of bigs and having his way with them from an offensive standpoint. I do think if there is one thing I noticed that is a little bit different, I do think he's playing with a little more physicality and a little more force with the Knicks. He just seems to have a 10-year pro's idea of what he wants to do. And I think moving from power forward, which is what he played the last 2 years in Minnesota, back to center in New York is a little more comfortable for him. He knows what he has to do there and how he has to get to his spots. And so you're seeing the rebounding come back at a super high level. You're seeing him go to the basket with real authority and just like really embracing the newness of it and his spot in a really great Knicks offense right now.
Yeah, I think he's met or exceeded anyone's expectations coming into this year so far. Lee, for you, what has surprised you when you watched Karl over this first portion of the season?
Man, Ian, thanks for having me on. Appreciate you. When the trade happened, I tweeted out immediately, Dynasty, because I typically get ahead of myself. But as someone who watches Minnesota, I've always been impressed by Cat's 5-level scoring. Never really liked the criticism that he received as being soft or a passive player. And what surprised me the most in New York is the MVP candidacy. I think he's really put together not just being a dominant offensive player and getting his own shot, but making the pass that leads to the pass that hits a shot. That's been, I think, the playmaking and the passing that's been the most of revelation for this Knicks team, because he fits in really seamless. He's not a system player. He's very much plug and play, and he's really developed an elite chemistry with Jalen Brunson to pick and roll.
Yeah, I'm going to go off the court. Maybe this isn't a surprise to John, just like Karl's offensive game is not a surprise to John, but the idea that he's come in here and he has fully stated that this is Jalen Brunson's team. He calls him Cap for captain all the time. He said several times, look, I just need to kind of get out of the way and let Jalen do what he does. And he's really embraced that sort of hierarchy. And I don't think Jalen Brunson cares at all whether people say this is his team or not. But I think it just creates an easier dynamic day in, day out around an NBA team when a player is accepting of that role, especially a player of Towns' stature. John, I'm curious. When Anthony Edwards, when it was clear that Anthony Edwards was kind of taking over as the number one option, how did Karl adjust to that? Was it an easy adjustment? And how much of that do you think helped him coming into New York?
Yeah, no, I think it's a really underrated part of Karl's personality and his approach to the game is his willingness to sacrifice for teammates. He was the man here in Minnesota for a very long time, the number one overall pick. And then Anthony Edwards comes in as another number one overall pick, and he's dynamic and he's really charming and he's ultra skilled. And you can see you could see the public narrative start to swirl. And whose team is it? Is it Cat's team? Is it Ant's team? And, in this league, a drama-filled league, people try to look for, conflict, and they tried to create it with Cat and Ant. And Cat just never would have that. He was ultra supportive of Anthony Edwards. He loved to share the spotlight with him. He had no problem stepping into the background when needed to let Ant shine. Anthony Edwards was also very good about sharing that spotlight with Karl-Anthony Towns. So they got along great. Cat was very deferential to him and very accommodating to him. And the other player that Karl-Anthony Towns was incredibly accommodating to was Rudy Gobert. The season before Gobert arrived, Karl-Anthony Towns was an all-NBA third-team center. And when they bring in Rudy Gobert, you're asking an all-NBA player to move positions at the face of the franchise, to move positions. And he did that for Rudy Gobert and to accommodate Rudy. And he was the Timberwolves player who was probably most invested in throwing Rudy the ball, getting him involved in offense, keeping him included. And so when he went to New York, I wasn't surprised at all that this was the approach that he had with Jalen Brunson, especially now that there isn't the long-term history of Karl with the Knicks franchise just as a franchise player. He's the new kid on the block. He's coming into a situation where Jalen Brunson is the established leader. And I always assumed that he was going to come in and be very welcoming, but also very deferential to Jalen's status. Karl wants to do the right thing from a teammate perspective that way. And, we've seen all across the league power struggles, players with selfishness or wanting more for their role and jealousy and pettiness and things like that. That's just never been Karl-Anthony Towns at all.
It's definitely been interesting to watch. And John, your perspective there is invaluable. So thank you for that. And Lee, I'm curious for you, it's so early, right? I think ultimately this trade will be judged in what happens in June, playoff appearances, championships, deep playoff runs, things like that. But where are you in terms of judging this deal at the moment as the Knicks get set to play the Timberwolves?
It's a home run, I think, just based on fit, as I mentioned earlier. What I like the most about Cat is he seems to be playing not just with a chip on his shoulder, but really for his mother. And he's talked about that repeatedly in post-game comments about how his mom was a Knick fan and he grew up a Knick fan. And I think that's the passion that's fueling this incredible MVP-level play. But I also think there's a huge difference between Randall and Karl-Anthony Towns. It's not just on the basketball side. It's also a level of self-awareness. Karl-Anthony Towns really operates on and off the court, very self-aware. He's not afraid to roast himself. He's not afraid to break the fourth wall with the Knicks fans and engage with them. And he doesn't try to act like he's fake tough or has fit a certain role. He's also shown that he's one of the most skilled offensive players in the league today and an all-around great teammate. If you listen to any of the commentary from his teammates in Minnesota today, from Gobert to Mike Conley, they all praise his character, not just his character, but his ability to really fit in and cultivate a sense of team unity. And I think he's doing that in New York as well. And the team needed it because Julius Randle was a big personality on the team. This team was originally built around his persona. And so Karl-Anthony Towns has really fit in seamlessly and helped build a bridge between everyone with his new role.